in the heart of the city I once called home. We gathered for one final feast, a last dance with the life we knew. But as I sat with my friends, a secret fear gnawed at my heart, the fear of leaving behind the life I had grown to love. Chapter 39. It was our last night in the city I'd grown to consider home. Our friends planned one final outing to commemorate the last day of our old lives, and we decided to have dinner at a fancy restaurant, basking in each other's company. After rummaging through Ariel's closet for hours, we finally settled on two of her last remaining dresses. The one I chose was in midnight blue, and it hugged me at the waist but then fell loosely past my hips. I curled my hair and let it drop in loose waves past my shoulders, and finished the look with perfect winged liners. As Ariel was putting on her nude high heels which matched her light pink fitted dress, the sound of our doorbell echoed in the house. I stalked towards the front door, my own heels clicking against the tile floors, and I pulled open the door to greet Elliot. He bore a wide smile as he spoke. "You girls ready?" I nodded, calling over my shoulder for Ariel that Elliot see he was our ride for the night. I grabbed my light coat and pushed my hands through the sleeves, and then seconds later Ariel appeared in the hallway, walking towards us with both our clutches in hand. She handed me mine and then we turned to leave through the door. In the car, Belly awaited us with an excited grin, her own hair styled into a loose bun, and wearing a gorgeous golden vest that looked full a little past her knees. My nerves were running on overdrive throughout the car ride, with a constant voice nagging in the back of my mind about how terrifying breaking this routine will be, how fearful leaving this life I'd grown so accustomed to behind will be. By the time we arrived at the restaurant, I hadn't spoken a single word in the car as everyone conversed joyfully about so many differing topics. But I was relieved that none of them had noticed my unusual quietness. As soon as we began to settle at our table inside the elegant but dark-themed restaurant, Noah started approaching us. A small lump began to grow in my throat as I remembered everything that had happened between us in the past few days. Our relationship had gone from playful and loving to utterly awkward and confusing, and I hated thinking that's how easily our 5-year relationship was going to end. He greeted everyone with a general hey before taking his own seat perpendicular to mine. For a brief second, our eyes met, and I gave him a tight smile. "I'm starving, so let's get to it." Ariel spoke as she opened up her menu and began scanning the options written down, her words halting the waiter in his tracks. He gave a nod with a polite smile as he pulled out his small notepad and a pen, jotting down everyone's orders. "I think I'll go with the usual mushroom Alfredo," I announced as I began to shut the menu. "Can't ever give up the pasta, can you?" Noah commented as he glanced at me from the corner of his eyes. When our gazes met, he gave a nervous chuckle. I forced on a smile. "Guess not." Reaching out for my glass of water, I took a little sip, my gaze moving around the table as I felt Ariel's eyes on me. She raised her brows in curious amusement, but I just gave a slight shrug. After a short waiting period, our dishes began to arrive. We wasted no time as we began to dig into the delicious courses, all the while discussing how different yet exciting this move will be. Ariel had her phone out and was scrolling past pictures, showing her in SPOs to Bella and EP8-END, and nodded in response. I was surprised to find that Elliot was genuinely interested in the topic, encouraging Ariel to show more pictures of how she imagined our kitchen and living room to be. I chuckled at that excitement. It was amusing how excited they were even though we were the ones moving away. I suddenly felt someone's gaze on me. When I looked up, I saw Noah staring at me with a ghost of a smile. I raised a brow. He coughed and looked down, clearing his throat. "Nora, would you like to get some fresh air with me?" His eyes flashing to the front doors of the restaurant. I hesitated for a second, my gaze shifting to everyone else seated at the table. But to no one's surprise, they were too preoccupied staring at Ariel's phone to notice us. When my eyes fell back on Noah, I found him to stare back with a pleading look, and a voice in the back of my mind insisted that I needed to sort this out before moving, or else I might have to risk losing a friendship I appreciated altogether. So reluctantly, I nodded. A wide grin spread across Noah's face, and he stepped back to stand up from his seat. I got up as well, and only then did everyone's attention divert to us. "We'll just step outside for a while, you guys keep doing your thing." I smiled teasingly. Elliot rolled his eyes but didn't hide his amazement. "It's an interesting project. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I hummed, biting back a smile while putting on my coat. Noah walked a couple steps ahead of me, and the further we got from our table, the tighter the knot in my stomach grew. Eventually we reached the front doors to the restaurant and we stepped outside into the chilly night. Walking a bit further to the side of the front door where it was quieter, Noah stopped in his tracks, his shoulders visibly stiff, and he inhaled deeply with his back still turned to me, and then abruptly he turned to finally face me. I stood back silently, expectantly, waiting for him to break the silence first. "Nora, don't do this," he finally spoke, a little painful strain in his voice. My eyebrows came down into a confused frown. "I'm not doing anything." Noah shook his head, exhaling a puff of air. "I mean tomorrow. Don't leave." My eyes widened a fraction in understanding, but I quickly covered my expression with a deep sigh, shaking my head. "Noah, we've already decided. You don't even know this guy. This isn't about him." I narrowed my eyes in annoyance. "I'm moving for a fresh start. Not everything I do concerns Avia." To my surprise, Noah let out a humorless chuckle. "You don't even realize it. But you do." My fists clenched down by my sides, and I felt the long nails digging into my palms. "You broke out a trust. You moved us back and forth between two states, and now you're leaving us again." I clenched my teeth, my anger raging inside of me. "You made me go to Indiana, for your own safety. Had you never gone behind our back and dated the guy, we wouldn't have had to seek his protection in the first place. Did you bring me out here just to blame me for everything that went wrong?" I hissed between clenched teeth. Noah shook his head. "I'm reminding you of all the reasons he's not good for you. And you are." A brief flash of surprise passed through Noah's jade orbs, and he took a step back as if my words had tackled him harder than expected. "Are we just going to pretend that what happened at Xavier's home never happened?" My voice lowering an octave. Noah ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect key of F. "No, we're not." "Then tell me what that was all about." Noah laughed, his hand coming up again to rub over the small stubble growing on his chin. "You can be so oblivious sometimes. It's excruciating." Not liking his words. "I've had feelings for you for years, Nora," he confessed, his eyes hardening. "You always told us you weren't ready to date yet, and I always gave you space. I didn't want to force you into anything. But then you concluded you finally had the right to try and kiss me." My fists clenched again, remembering us in the kitchen back at Xavier's place. "Then I thought I had the right to try." His voice had hardened, his shoulders turning stiff again. "You were willing to give a guy whom you knew absolutely nothing about, whom risked all our lives, who's probably God and Mafia. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." At least I knew he felt the same way. Suddenly, Noah staggered back a step, my words hitting him harder than I intended. The brief flash of pain that passed through his once bright, shimmery gaze clenched my heart in my chest, and I quickly came to explain my response. "I do love you, Noah. Just don't." My mouth fell open, interrupted by his sudden coldness. "Don't say it." He shook his head, strands of his soft hair falling over his forehead. "Noah, please." I pleaded for his eyes to meet mine, but he refused to. Suddenly, his steps began to near me as he moved forward, but just when I thought he was going to stop in front of me, his footsteps continued past me in complete silence as he moved towards the doors of the restaurant, leaving me standing alone out in the chilly breeze. My heart was clenching in my chest, and involuntarily, my eyes began to well up as I stared shockingly at the door he just passed through. I didn't want things to end this way. I was moving away the next day, and I had no other chance to fix things with him. This couldn't mean the end of our friendship, could it? My emotions were in a whirlwind. Pain. To my agent extraordinaire, misunderstandings. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Anger all wrapped around my heart, and I gave a silent sob, a couple tears escaping the corner of my eyes and rolling down my cold cheeks. But then suddenly, I felt the air shiver down my spine and my stomach give a slight flutter. Without having to second guess, I turned around to face the only person I knew to trigger such sensations. What are you doing here? I rasped out, feeling the chilly breeze cool the long trails my tears had left behind on my cheeks. I wanted to make sure you were enjoying your last night. Xavier's warm velvety voice spoke as he came to a stop a couple feet ahead of me. He wore a fitted black tuxedo, his hands in the pockets of his dress pants. Gradually, one hand left his pocket and rose towards me, and he ran the back of his index finger along the wet trail on my cheek. Those aren't happy tears. I gulped down the growing lump in my throat, moving my head to the side and then slightly dabbing the tears away with the palm of my hands. I began to explain, but the words felt heavier than before on my tongue, so I settled for one word instead, hoping he wouldn't prod further. Noah. Xavier nodded once, his hand sneaking its way into his pocket once more, and his eyes moving to the ground. Confused by his reaction, you knew. His silver gaze met mine, swirling with different emotions. I tried not to eavesdrop, he confessed, a hint of shame lingering in his voice. Surprisingly grateful that he'd heard our conversation, because that meant I didn't have to word it again. I didn't mean to hurt him, I whispered, feeling the lumps growing from in my throat yet once more. You're not obliged to love everyone back. My gaze met his shimmering silver orbs. My eyes welled up again. The pain and fear of losing one of my closest friends gnawed at my chest. But I do love him. Xavier's gaze softened as he took a step forward, his warmth and scent now radiating off his build and engulfing me in a comforting manner. His hand came up to cup the side of my cheek, his thumb gently rubbing at my cold skin. Just not the way he loves you. My eyes widened as I registered his words. How did you know that he loves me? I mean, does he also know Noah tried to kiss me? My heart clenched tightly at the thought I didn't want him to. There was already enough tension between them as is. I could hear how his heartbeats rose within your presence. Xavier confessed. I inhaled sharply, his words unintentionally hurting me more than they should have had the power to. How long did you know? Did everyone know how Noah felt towards me? Since the first day we met. The lake inn. I could feel my chest tightening as I ran different images in my mind all the time to the conclusion that Noah had feelings for me, but was too oblivious to do so. And I hated it. I hated feeling oblivious and ignorant and naive. All the things I swore I'd never be. Come on. Xavier's familiar voice pulled me out of my thoughts, and I felt his hand sneaking down to grab my own, feeling my cold, small hand be warmly engulfed by his own brought me an indescribably marvelous sensation of safety and contentment, and the feeling wrapped around a heavy heart like a magical blanket that shielded me away from all pain and heartbreak. Let's get you home so you can get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. When his lips curved up into an excited grin, my stomach fluttered once more, and I nodded in acceptance to his request. Chapter 40. By early noon the next day, to my agent extraordinaire, misunderstandings. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Xavier and I arrived at the state of Indiana. Vincent and Seth both patiently awaited us outside the wide gates of the airport, chatting animatedly among each other as we stepped outside into the chilly breeze. As if he sensed our presence, Vincent had stopped the conversation amid his talking and turned around to greet us as we approached him from behind. Xavier had tried to convince Ariel and I to stay at his house, generously offering to take us to trips to the city where we could furniture shop until our apartment is ready to move into. But we had to decline since we already planned to stay at Seth's apartment, and it also felt invasive because it was his Pax home. Then we departed there, with promises of seeing each other the next day. As soon as we had arrived at Seth's apartment, Ariel and I tossed everything aside and rushed to the room we were to share during our stay. Too jet-lagged from the constant travels to do anything else. We had changed into cozy pajamas and within minutes hopped onto the large king-sized bed, losing both our consciousness within seconds as we fell into a deep, much-needed slumber. Later that night I woke up with a rumbling stomach. When I glanced over my shoulder, I saw Ariel to be deep asleep, soft snores escaping her parted lips. Gently, I pulled the covers off of my body and my feet fell to the floor. I hopped off the bed and trod towards the door. Entering the small hallway and reaching for a door I faintly remembered to be the bathroom. True to my gut instinct, I washed my face with cold water, suddenly feeling refreshed, and exited the bathroom to stalk towards the open living room. Faintly, I heard the sound of cheerful whistling. Straining my ear to detect the source better, I followed to where it led me Seth's open bedroom door. I knocked once out of respect to his privacy, but he didn't answer, and instead continued humming and whistling joyfully. I walked inside the bedroom, my eyes searching along the place. I called out. I followed the source of his voice, which led to the bathroom, pushing the open door further apart. I sneaked a glance inside to see Seth kneeling on the floor by his filled bathtub, his hands working at something. Scrubby-a-dub-dub. There's a kitty in my tub, he sang in a joyful tone. Stepping further inside I glanced over his shoulder with great curiosity, unaware that he'd adopted a cat. When my eyes landed on the creature in the tub, I let out an involuntary shriek, jumping a couple steps away. Seth, what the hell is that? He looked over his shoulder at me, his eyebrows lowering into a frown. Standing upright, he reached out for a towel and began wrapping it around the animal, drying its fur. "丨The extraordinaire, misunderstandings. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Are you kidding me? That's no cat. That's a freaking possum. Yeah, he said in a dull tone, whose name is Kitty. My eyes widened as large as saucers, unable to believe the man standing in front of me as he continued to scrub the possum with the towel, drying it of the bath water. When I found him, I thought he was a cat. He responded to my "here, kitty kitty," so I decided that suited him as a name. He explained so nonchalantly as if this was the most normal thing in the world. I glanced between him and the possum in disbelief. "You're mad," I whispered, frightened by the creature screeching as it moved around the towel in Seth's arms. "Hey," Seth glared at me. "I'm a hero. I saved its life." Sighing in defeat, I retreated towards the door. "Whatever you say, buddy, but you better keep your kitty inside your bedroom quarters because if Ariel runs into this thing she will burn the building down to its core," Seth grumbled, his fingers gently Possum's head. I rolled my eyes and left the bathroom, making my way towards the kitchen where I began to prep myself a quick sandwich to have before returning to bed. The next day, Seth offered to drive Ariel and I around the city to visit some furniture shops. We left early in the morning, having a quick breakfast in one of the most popular local cafes. I had a croissant with an iced vanilla latte, and it tasted heavenly. Seriously, I sighed as I set my drink back down on our shared table. This drink, heavenly. I voiced my thoughts. Right, this could be Aya's. Ariel beamed, her excitement for this move still evident. I nodded my head eagerly. "The extraordinaire, misunderstandings. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Hey, Sam," Seth abruptly exclaimed, causing us to flinch in our seats in surprise. He stared behind our shoulders as he waved, a wide grin on his lips. We glanced over our shoulders and saw Sam and Scarlett both standing by the ordering counter, their gazes now fixed on us. When they recognized us, a wide smile appeared on their faces. They grabbed their drinks and approached us, a couple shopping bags in their hands. "Hey," I greeted them cheerfully. "Hey, you guys. It's so great running into you." Scarlett beamed, her eyes squinting adorably. "Were you guys shopping?" Ariel asked, Scarlett nodded excitingly. You guys should join us. We can direct you to some of the best shops around, Sam suggested. That would be really great, I said appreciatively. Soon enough we had grabbed our drinks and were on our way out the cafe's doors, strolling down the streets. It's so great that you guys moved here. We'll have a lot of fun. Scarlett beamed as she walked beside me. Her spirit was so optimistic and bubbly it was impossible not to feel better in her presence. I smiled widely, nodding along to her words. I have no doubt that we will. Seth, Sam and Ariel were a couple steps ahead of us, chatting among themselves as they pointed at different shops and contemplated walking in. How are you with Vincent? I found myself suddenly blurting out. A mere second later, when I realized how embarrassing asking someone I barely knew about her private life was. A deep blush crept up my cheeks. I was about to apologize for my bluntness when I was surprised by Scarlett's wide smile. We're doing amazing. It's insane. Really, when you think that we met merely about a month ago. But I feel as if I've known him since forever. She glanced at me from the corner of her eyes. Her gaze filled with awe. Reluctantly, I let out a sigh of relief. It's so great to hear someone else talk about how bizarre all of this is. Sometimes I feel like something is really wrong with me. I chuckled as I shook my head in disbelief. I know what you mean. This whole mate bond is one that is very difficult to grasp onto. No sane person could make sense of these feelings unless they actually experienced them. We slowed our steps as Ariel was drawn to one particular shop. She walked inside and then was followed by Seth and Sam. Scarlett and I lingered behind. Her gaze inspected me, my hands subconsciously fumbling by my sides, my nerves and emotions in overdrive. Believe me, I know how scary this is. Before Vincent, I had never even had a boyfriend. Scarlett smiled, but my eyes widened. Then meeting him must have been very intense. I can't imagine how scared she must have felt. Getting involved in all of this with no previous experience in the field. Scarlett nodded. It was, but it was also one of the best things to happen to me, she confessed. It's almost like a fairy tale. Everything seems too good to be true, only it actually is true. I chuckled, enjoying listening to her outlook. And Vincent was very considerate as to never make me feel uncomfortable in any way. She continued on, a hint of gratefulness in her tone. He was very sweet and gentle, and maybe even a bit old-fashioned. Confused. Vincent. Old-fashioned. Now how would that be? Remembering his playful and teasing attitude during the time I'd known him, he took forever to finally kiss me. Scarlett giggled, and my heart sunk momentarily, connecting her words to my own personal experience. We dated for a while, and he had more than enough chances to try. But it wasn't until he asked me to be his girlfriend, and then swore his vows to me as my mate, that he asked if he could finally kiss me and actually waited until the word yes left my lips to go ahead and do it. Scarlett laughed again, but this time in disbelief. Wow, I breathed, equally as surprised by his behavior. I hadn't expected Vincent to be like that. Honestly, they're all like that. You know. Scarlett glanced at me from the corner of her eye, and a warm blush crept up my neck. They're old-fashioned in that sense. As if she could already hear my thoughts, I had wondered if maybe the reasons Avia hadn't tried anything was because he wasn't truly attracted to me the way I understood soulmates to be. I had seen the way Vincent couldn't keep away from Scarlett for too long, constantly holding her hands or wrapping his arm around her waist in a protective manner. But Xavier sometimes seemed distant in comparison. He always gave me enough space, which frankly I was thankful for. But I wouldn't lie and say I hadn't hoped to get a little closer. I never really thought much about it, I confessed, my voice an octave lower than earlier, unsure if I was right to speak the words. I don't. I trailed off, unsure of how to word my worries. I don't deal too well with physical affection. My face felt on fire by this point, my gaze secured on the concrete floor. Why is that? Scarlett asked in a low voice. Before rushing, if you don't mind me asking, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, You don't have to answer that. My eyes meeting her embarrassed gaze. It's all right, I assured her, my mind drifting far. I just didn't have the best experience with my ex, recalling how the gentle, loving touches had turned into violent, painful ones had my heart clenching tightly in my chest as I stood in the middle of the city with tightened fists. Oh, Scarlett whispered, her gaze falling onto me. I'm sorry to hear that. But, she trailed off, and I lifted my head to meet her eyes. There you have your answer. She gave me a soft smile. I pondered over her words, confused by what they could mean. Then it suddenly hit me, and I gasped loudly. Xavier must have kept this little distance between us for this particular reason. He knew of my past, and he knew of how certain shadows still lingered in my life. Could that truly be why? I searched in Scarlett's eyes for answers to my unspoken questions, and they sparkled back with joy. Trust me, if it was up to him, he wouldn't spend a second away from you, she promised, a ghost of a smile on her lips. I bit the inside of my cheek, holding back the response that was on the tip of my tongue. If it was up to me, I wouldn't have let him. Chapter 41. I tugged at one end of the plain white bedsheet as Ariel grunted while struggling with the other end, bending at an odd angle with one foot on top of the mattress and the other flat on the floor. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Exasperated and out of breath. Wait for me to tuck in my end before going in with yours. It's not that difficult. I rolled my eyes. You keep saying, she exclaimed, before abruptly releasing her end of the sheet and lifting her hands in the air. I'm done. I need a break, she mumbled as she turned away from the bed. I groaned. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I called out after her as she left through the bedroom door, but she just shook her head. It's really not that complicated. Yet she always struggled with making her bed, incapable of lifting the heavy mattress and tucking the sheet underneath it. Even back at our old apartment, I had been helping her with her bed for as long as I could remember. But this time we had gone for a size bigger in bed. Instead of singles, we had promoted ourselves to small doubles, however. Now we had to deal with the consequences. It can't all be rainbows and butterflies and what not. Am I right? With great effort and a heavy dose of patience, I managed to tuck the bedsheet in after another 5 minutes, just as I had sighed contentedly and tumbled on top of the soft mattress, covered by freshly washed and floral-scented sheets. My phone began to ring from down the hall. I groaned in annoyance, rolling over the bed until I reached the end and hopped onto the floor. I walked out of my new bedroom, down the small hallway, and towards our open living room space. Ariel sat on our white couch with her eyes fixed on the TV, as my phone rang beside it. On my way to unplug my phone from the charger beside the TV, I blocked her sight from whatever was playing on the screen, and she mumbled a couple incoherent words as she shooed me away. I rolled my eyes, glaring at her childish behavior, then grabbed my phone and returned to my bedroom. Once I shut my bedroom door behind me, I glanced down at the caller at which read the name Mom. A grin spread across my cheeks as I accepted the call and brought the phone to my ear. Hey, Mama. I slumped down onto my bed, my gaze fixing on the pale white ceiling and the simple silver chandelier hanging in the center of it. Nora. Oh, my darling. I have missed your voice. Her familiar voice sang, and it instantly warmed my heart. I've missed you, too. How are you guys? We're doing well, darling. But never mind us now. I just read your text. What is this about moving away? When did this happen? She questioned, concern evident in her voice. I had decided to send my parents a text informing them of my latest decision only a couple days ago. I knew I had to settle down first before letting them know, or else they might freak out about my big and sudden decision, and tempt me to cancel on the idea altogether. Ariel and I were talking about it for a while. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We were in need of a fresh start, and we only got today. Haven't we? I spoke the words she repeated to me when I was young, encouraging me to leap at the first available opportunity to follow my dreams. Well, yes, but what about your jobs? Your apartment? Ariel was able to transfer to the company branch in this city. And as for me, I will finally have the opportunity to work as a freelance graphic designer. And I've saved up enough to get me through a few months until I get a grip on. Oh, and we found a better apartment here. It's bigger and has a better view. I smiled contentedly, getting up from my seat on the bed and stopping at my wide window. It has a great view of a small park below, where children played and families gathered. Oh no, don't you think you might be rushing into this? She voiced her concern. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel. Heart thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I might be, but I'd rather live and make a few mistakes than overthink everything and then chicken out. I waited for a response, but the line remained silent for a few seconds too long. I pulled the phone away from my ear, glancing at the screen to see that the call was still ongoing. That's my baby girl. A distant voice appraised proudly. A wide grin spread across my cheeks. Daddo, I had missed him so much. Hey B. Now his voice louder and clearer. You must just away tearing up. She's so proud of you. I rolled my eyes. Oh, Dad. His voice resonating through the line, and I instantly felt warmer on the inside. How are you doing? I miss you so much. I'm all right, pumpkin. And I miss you, too. Maybe we'll come visit your new place after our trip is over with. Oh, I'd love that. I beamed. When are you guys returning? Maybe by next month. Perfect. Everything should be done and ready by then. Well, darling, it was wonderful hearing your voice. But the ship's about to sail, so we better go. Now you take good care of yourself. You hear me? Dad's tough FAA came on. And I chuckled. Yes, sir. You do too. There came a bit of shuffling on the other end of the line. Then Mom's voice came through. Nora, darling, I'm glad you're doing what's best for you. But promise me that you will be careful and that you'll take good care of yourself. Mom, but rolled my eyes at the same time. If only they knew what I was able to survive through. They wouldn't be doubting how much I could care after myself. But I could never tell them the truth, even though they were my parents, because I knew how much it would hurt and traumatize them. They deserve to live theirs now and not have to worry about their adult but magnet of but bad luck of a daughter. We love you. My mother nearly screamed as rushing voices came from the background, followed by a loud horn. I squirmed away from the phone, but yelled back that I loved them. 2 seconds before the line went dead. I chuckled to myself as I tossed my phone on my bed, now in a much brighter mood since speaking to my family. And I stalked back into the living room where Ariel was still sat in the same spot, only this time scrolling on her phone. That was my parents, I announced as I sat across from her. Her head lifted up from her phone to look at me. Oh, how are they doing? Good. I nodded. Mom was worried I might be moving too fast with my decisions. That sparked Ariel's interest, because she locked her phone and fixed her full attention on me. Do you think you are? I bit the inside of my cheeks, pondering over her question. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was worried I might be, since I tend to overthink my decisions before I go through with them. But this experience planning on moving out and away within days, and actually going through with the decisions sparked a feeling inside of me that was quite foreign. It gave me an adrenaline rush that made me feel like I was, for the first time in my life, living and experiencing instead of overthinking and fearing. I have had my share of regrets and mistakes, and for a long time I feared making more. But isn't that how we learn? By making mistakes and regretting our choices. Because only then do we learn and rise stronger than before. Earth to Nora. I snapped my head back up, my eyes falling on Ariel's quizzical gaze. I was so lost in my train of thought I forgot she was waiting for an answer. Oh, God, she groaned. You do regret it, don't you? You wish you never listened to me now? I interrupted quickly, my eyes widening. I don't. Ariel eyed me skeptically, her gaze moving across my face in search for any sign of doubt. You don't? I shook my head, a small smile grazing my lips. You know, I just told my mom I'd rather lie than make a few mistakes that overthink everything and then chicken out. And I think that perfectly sums up how I feel right now. I glanced up at Ariel to see her face softening. It was a risk I was willing to take. And so far, it's playing out surprisingly very well. Ariel squealed, abruptly jumping up from her seat and nearly holding me into a hug. Oh, I knew you wouldn't regret it. She embraced me joyfully, full of excitement. I chuckled, patting her shoulder twice, then cutting back to look at her face. Did you now? She rolled her eyes and fell back into her previous seat. This is our new beginning. We will make it worthwhile. I nodded in agreement. We will. Suddenly my phone began to ring again, the ringtone echoing in our apartment all the way from my bedroom. I got up from my seat and headed back towards my room. Huffing in aggravation, all I wanted was some rest. Today had been a very long day. When I reached for my phone, I wondered what could be so important that my parents had to call me back while in the middle of their trip. However, when I flipped the phone to glance at the screen, my heart sunk to my stomach when another name popped on the caller ID. Without wasting another second, I accepted the call and put the phone to my ear, my stomach fluttering. Hey, I greeted, an involuntary smile creeping up my face. Hello, Nora. Xavier's velvety voice boomed through the phone, wrapping itself around me in a warm embrace. What's up? I tried my best to sound casual, but recently I had figured out that no matter how long I'd known Xavier for, my heart would still skip a beat at mention of his name. What are you currently doing? I looked around my bedroom, my floor covered by several bags waiting to be unpacked. Nothing. It can wait. I'd love to have you over for dinner, Xavier stated, but it sounded more like a question as he trailed off by the end of the sentence. I grinned excitedly. I would love to. Wonderful. Should I pick you up at 6? I hummed in response, giving my approval. Soon enough we said our goodbyes and Xavier stayed on the line for a few seconds longer, until I hung up first. My first thought had been thank God I had showered and curled my hair earlier this morning, which meant now I could skip this part and spend the next couple hours picking my outfit and doing my makeup. Falling to my knees by the duffel bags and backpack scattered across the floor, I began zipping them up and rummaging through. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I need your help, I yelled while frantically yanking out any dresses and fads I could get my hands on and tossing them across the mattress. What's up? Ariel popped her head through the door, a chocolate bar in hand. Help me pick out something. Xavier will be here by 6. Her eyes suddenly widened. You have a date? Yeah. Out of breath, Ariel suddenly squealed, jumping forward and falling to my bed, rummaging through the pile of dresses. She grabbed a black floral dress that fell a little above the knees and put it to the side. Continuing through the rest, I stopped my action, watching my best friend go through the pile of clothes with a wide smile on her lips, helping me prepare for a date I was nervous about. Brought a wide smile to my lips and warmed my heart immeasurably. I felt beyond grateful for having her by my side and for this new journey we were going on. Oh, we're about to have so much fun, she grinned, glancing at me from the corner of her eyes and winking creepily. I laughed out loud, feeling the weight of my nerves evaporate, and in its presence came a feeling my best friend never ceased to make me feel hope for a brighter future. Chapter 42. I was just applying my nude pink lipstick, the final touch to my subtle and glowy make-up look, when my phone dinged as it received a text message. I dropped the lipstick on the bathroom counter and retreated to my bedroom, grabbing my phone from off my bed to see a text notification from Xavier. Are you ready? I typed back that I am. Barely 2 seconds later, the doorbell rung. The sound echoed through our barely furnished apartment all the way to my stomach, where it twisted into a knot. This wasn't our first date, but for some reason, I was so nervous my hands were trembling. Breathe. I forced myself to inhale deeply, feeling the cool air travel through my windpipe to expand my lungs and wash the trembles away. You ready? Ariel's head popped through my bedroom door, her eyes taking in my appearance. I wore a red flowy dress that fell a little above my knees with black boots, and was going to top it off with my black leather jacket. My hair fell down into loose locks, and my make-up was subtle with only mascara and some highlight and light blusher on my cheeks. Ariel's lips formed an O shape, and when she inhaled I knew she was about to blow a whistle. But I was quick to shush her. She stared at me confused, but I just shrugged my reaction off. It's not like I could tell her Xavier had superhuman senses and would enable him to hear her from 2 walls down. I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder, and as I passed her on my way out my bedroom, I leaned in and whispered, "Wish me luck." Ariel winked at me. Blow his mind away. I giggled giddily, like an excited schoolgirl who's finally scored a date with her school crush. When I reached the front door, I inhaled deeply to prepare myself to face the man whose eyes could send my knees shaking, and my heart erupting into 1,000 butterflies. When I finally opened the door, Xavier stood patiently with his hands in the pockets of his black dress pants. He wore a clean black tuxedo, looking ravishing, when his silver gaze fell on my brown ones. My heart melted in my chest. His lips curved up into a small smile. "You look as beautiful as ever." I felt a warm blush creep up my cheeks, and was glad I had gone easy on the blusher. My natural blushing will be more than enough for the evening. "Thank you." Xavier offered his hand, and I took it. The moment our touches came in contact, I felt the familiar sparks ignite beneath my skin, traveling across the length of my arm. I followed in his steps as he led me to the elevator, and motioned for me to go in as he held the door open. And when I passed by him, a gush of air brought to me his mahogany scent, and its familiar warmth wrapped around my heart and reminded me of all the reasons moving to this place was the right choice for me. It meant I'd be that much closer to the man I was beginning to fully accept as my soulmate. Because what other title could you give to a person who makes you feel things you never imagined to be humanly possible? When we reached the ground floor, Xavier and I walked past the front gates and found his black Range Rover parked right at front. He was quick to hold open the passenger door for me, and I smiled at his never-ending chivalrous ex. When we began riding down the roads, Xavier's voice filled the space around us. "How was your day spent?" I shifted in my seat to face him better. "It was very good. We got a few things done around the place." Then I spoke to my parents on the phone. Xavier's eyes lit up, and he glanced at me from the corner of his gaze. "How is their trip going?" "Very well. They might come to visit my new place next month." "That's wonderful. I hope I'll have the pleasure of meeting them then." My heart skipped a beat. I never thought of introducing Xavier to my parents. He would be the first man I'd introduce to them. Although that made me nervous, it also thrilled me to some extent. I had a feeling my dad would enjoy his company very much. "I hope so too," I admitted, an excited grin sneaking its way up my face. We continued the drive down the familiar streets in a comfortable silence. Xavier tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. As I studied his motions, I came to realize that ever since I'd first met him, this is the most relaxed he's been. There was a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, and he radiated off a feeling of great contentment. I had decided then that this was my favorite image of Xavier today, with no grim nor frown lines covering the smooth skin of his features. With that ghost of a smile playing on his lips, and that little extra sparkle in his shimmery gaze, I wanted to make sure that he remained as so. "So, what are our plans for tonight?" I asked as soon as we took a turn from the busy streets of the city and towards the silent and empty roads that lead to his estate. "We'll dine in our open garden," Xavier responded, glancing at me from the corner of his eyes. My face lit up just imagining the scenery. "I hope you've dressed warmly," he remarked in sudden realization, his eyes roaming over my leather jacket and a slight frown creasing between his eyebrows when his eyes fell on my exposed knees. "I have," I replied instantly, wishing that frown away. Xavier hummed in contemplation, his eyes returning back to the road as he took a couple more turns. A few minutes later, we arrived at the wide golden gates of Xavier's pack home. As we neared the entrance, my gaze took in the beauty of the flowing fountain set in the center of the driveway. As it glowed with a fairy tale-like elegance, Xavier parked the car by the front of the wide stairway leading to the double doors, and within seconds, as I had barely unbuckled my seatbelt, he'd arrived at my passenger door and opened it. Involuntarily, I flinched as I was taken aback by his sudden speed. A cheeky grin spread across his face as I scowled at him. To my agent extraordinaire, misunderstandings, thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It'll take some time to get used to that, I mumbled with a small smile as I stepped out of the car. Our hands brushed as we stood side by side, ready to ascend the flight of stairs, and Xavier took opportunity of that short contact to trail his fingers across the back of my hand, before entwining them with my own. His warm hand engulfed mine, and he led me to the front doors of his house. The first thing to capture my attention as we entered was the fact that the place was much louder than the last time I'd been here. Contrary to my last visit, the house felt full of life as faint chattering and laughter echoed from all around the place. When I glanced at Xavier, he offered me a reassuring smile, before leading me to where the open living room space was. When we got closer, I found a group of people sitting around the couches conversing joyfully. They sensed our presence from all distance away, and their voices lowered as their eyes came to study us nearing them. Instantly, they all stood from their places to greet us respectfully, their faces brightened by wide smiles. To my agent extraordinaire, misunderstandings, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Some of them greeted, before turning and acknowledging me by the name I had yet to get accustomed to hearing. Luna. I then recognized Vincent as he stepped forward, stopping a couple feet away from me. Luna Nora, it's a pleasure to have you back. My eyes widened as my heart skipped a beat. Luna Nora, that sounded very foreign to my ears, but it had a nice ring to it, and carried a thrill that excited me to the bones. I felt the slightest bit of pressure as Xavier squeezed my hand in reassurance, no doubt sensing my unease. I glanced up at him only to take a double take at his expression. His silver gaze stared down at me standing beside him with a newfound emotion that melted my heart pride. It's good to see you, too, Vincent. I spoke after too long, a small blush creeping up my cheeks. Everyone's attention was fully fixated on me, and all I wanted was to cower back into a hole and hide within the comfort of the darkness forever. Kun. Xavier saved me by tugging at my hands, pulling me away from the curious crowd. Everyone gave me kind smiles, some people of which I had the pleasure of meeting before but most of whom were new to me. All I could do was smile back awkwardly as Xavier led us past the grand staircase and towards the open glass doors that led to the gardens. I apologize if that made you uncomfortable. No, not at all. I tried my best to cover my nervousness with a big smile, but I feared it might have come out as a grimace instead. I just wasn't expecting to meet so many people. Xavier let out a small noise, and when I glanced at him in confusion I found him trying to hold back a smile. My eyes widened. What? That was only Vincent's family. My eyes widened even bigger than before. I had thought those were everyone, but I guess I was the fool to think so, since Xavier had already told me 3 families lived in this large estate. Don't worry, he quickly spoke, trying to ease my nerves. Baby steps. I smiled at that, liking the way it sounded. Only then did my gaze shift to the scenery ahead of us, and my jaw slackened and fell in amazement. The large garden was illuminated by bright fairy lights that hung loosely between various trees, and they cast their glow on the hundreds of blooming flowers that led the trail to a small table in the far distance. To my agent extraordinaire, misunderstandings, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I trailed off, unable to form any coherent words that would describe the astonishment I felt. The scene was right out of a fairy tale, and I was waiting to be pinched awake. Kun. Xavier offered his hand to me again. which I gladly took without a second of hesitation, and he began to lead us towards the table at the center. The dishes were already set, covered to keep warm, with long-lit candles set in the center between our plates. The drinks were already poured, and if I listened carefully enough, I could hear a faint classical music playing somewhere in the distance. We shouldn't be disturbed, Xavier informed me, a small smile playing on his lips and a sparkle shimmering in his eyes. We have the night to ourselves. I smiled giddily, enjoying the sound of that. Then suddenly there came a tapping of 4 paws, something approaching us. For a second, I was alerted as I stood straighter and examined my surrounding, but when I turned to face where we came from I saw the source of the noise. A light grey pit bull came charging at us. His mouth hung open, lifted at the edges, and what appeared to be a little smile, with his tongue out panting for air. I flinched when he passed me in a blur, attacking Xavier's legs and letting out a couple barks that were too loud for my comfort. To my surprise, Xavier broke out into a chuckle, falling to his knees to grab the pit bill and scratch behind his ears. The tail never stopped wagging, and the tongue never stopped licking. In complete awe, I stood back and watched Xavier's genuine and affectionate manners as he patted the pit bull and chuckled at his attempts to jump on top of him. When Xavier moved his hands from the pit bull's torso to his ears, my eyes fell on the spot his hands had covered seconds ago, and an involuntary gasp escaped my lips. That caught both their attentions. Xavier looked up at me, a knowing smile on his lips, while the adorable creature stared up at me with intrigue. My gaze trailed from the innocent eyes to the countless bite scars decorating its torso, and my eyes widened. Xavier stood to his full height, his eyes studying my reaction before he commanded the dog with a simple sit, to which he immediately complied. "Laura, meet Ander," Xavier spoke, his eyes trained on me. I gulped down the emotions swirling inside of me, and cracked a smile. "He's adorable." Xavier nodded his head, glancing down at the dog and patting his head once. "What happened to him?" I couldn't help but ask. Inhaling deeply, Xavier glanced at the table, and motioned with his hands for us to take a seat. I complied and followed his steps as he pulled back my chair and helped me down. Before taking his own seat across from me, his eyes trailed over to where the dog sat patiently, his eyes trained on Xavier, shining, and his tongue graped out as he continued panting. "I found him a couple years ago," he told me, his eyes still trained on the dog. "We rescued him from an underground dog fighting ring." My stomach sunk when those words echoed to my ears, my eyes moving to the adorable creature that sat beside us patiently and quietly. My heart ached for him, taking in the angry scars that covered his torso. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madame Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "He's in a much better state now," Xavier spoke, trying to change the subject. He reached forward and lifted the cover off my plate, followed by his own. The dish, to my complete surprise, was Italian. I stared at Xavier in astonishment, and he gave me a knowing smile. He remembered. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madame Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Hormones, calm down, please." He motioned towards the dish, and I lifted up my fork to begin eating. Throughout the next couple hours we ate a dinner and conversed joyfully, asking questions about the things we had yet to learn about one another. And I found that talking to Xavier was easy, like it was second nature. We joked and we laughed, not like we had known each other for only a month or so, but as if we had known each other for as long as we had been alive. After dinner, Xavier offered that we take a walk in the garden to a place he wanted to show me. My excitement was at its peak as I kept asking him what it was, but the only thing he gave away was the fact that I'd really enjoy it, which only increased my intrigue. His fingertips trailed across the sleeve of my leather jacket, wrapping gently around my wrist, then sliding down to wrap his hand around my own. I watched the action take place and felt another involuntary smile spread across my lips, and I shifted our hands to entwine our fingers, gently tugging my hand to pull me forwards. Xavier guided me to follow a step behind him further from the house and deeper into the gardens, taking a trail we hadn't had the chance to walk down together before. The brightness began to fade as we parted ways with the fairy lights, and soon the only light that shone down on us was that of the bright moons. Xavier seemed to have the path memorized like the back of his hand, as he confidently led us to where his destination was. Soon we reached a small clearing, and when Xavier slowed his pace and pulled me forward to stop beside him, I found that in the center of the clearing lay a large pond. An involuntary gasp escaped my lips, my eyes taking in the natural beauty. I glanced at Xavier with the wild red eyes. "Are you kidding me?" I had to hide back my laughter. This place was beyond the extraordinary. Xavier's eyes twinkled under the glow of the moon, and he led me closer to the pond. When I sneaked a glance inside, I saw dozens of large KOI fish swimming in the clear waters, the water which reflected the brightly lit moon and the millions of shimmering stars. "This place is breathtaking," I sighed in content. If I had this as my view, I'd never grow bored. My gaze moved from the natural beauty of the earth to the spectacularly infinite sky, and as my eyes traveled across the vast expanse, it suddenly hit me how perfectly this night has unfolded, with Xavier and I ending our date by standing under the glow of the full moon and the twinkling of a million stars. As I felt the fingertips trail over my arm again, I moved my eyes from the sight above to the striking silver orbs of the person standing a couple inches away from me. Only when I felt Xavier's exhale on the side of my cheek did I realize how close we were in proximity, with his warmth radiating off his layered black tuxedo and wrapping around my senses, his mahogany, scented aroma being all that I could smell as I stood among hundreds of blooming flowers. He was all over my senses, and when his hand lifted to trace an index finger across my cheek, my knees merely buckled beneath me, so I had to clasp onto his arms for support. His gentle touch lowered from my cheeks to my jaw, where he rubbed soothing circles that only rushed the blood to my cheeks. My gaze was captivated by his, and his by mine, and I felt as if all my surrounding was melting away into the complete void, and the only subject that grounded me to my present was the man standing before me, my mate. My hands moved from his arms to the back of his neck, where I pulled him closer to me with all my might, crushing my body into his so tightly that I felt an inch closer and our hearts might meet. When we finally pulled away, I had never felt warmer in my entire life. Xavier's eyes opened to reveal his silver gaze, tinted a hint darker than the usual, but glimmering with a spark that could burn the entire world around us. His arms curled around my waist and pulled me closer to his chest, the only place where I felt I completely belonged. Epilogue 1 year later. I awoke one morning to the soft chirping of the birds outside our balcony, the rays of sunlight beaming through the open glass door and falling on the parts of my skin that lay bare. I rolled over the silky sheets of our king-size bed but found the other side of the sheets cold and empty. My eyebrows lowered into a confused frown as I studied the room around me, but found that I was its only occupant. Tossing the soft sheets off to the side, I pushed myself away from the mattress and hopped on the floor, the cool tiles causing a slight shiver to run up my spine. I followed the route to the bathroom and turned on the shower, letting the water warm up as I splashed my face in the sink and brushed my teeth. After a quick shower, I changed into a beige floral dress that fell above my knees, and brushed my fingers through my wavy brown locks to straighten them after a night of tossing and turning in my deep slumber. Then I quickly put on my white Vans and hurried out the bedroom door in search of the man I'd gotten used to waking in the arms of. As I passed down the hallway and towards the grand stairway, the joyful chattering and laughter echoed in the house, a noise I had not only grown accustomed to, but also started feeling empty without. It had become a part of my daily routine to wake up to the voices of the families in our pack house, ever since I'd accepted Xavier's offer and moved into the pack home 2 months ago. When I reached the ground floor, I turned a corner heading towards the kitchen, the place where the voices sounded the loudest. As I entered the busy room, my gaze roamed across the faces of the people I'd started to consider my family. "Laura," Scarlett exclaimed, a wide smile on her face as she gently pushed Vincent's arm away, forcing him to drop his hold from around her waist. He turned to greet me with a slight nod to his head, and a smile on his lips. "Good morning, everyone." I greeted the people in the kitchen, most of whom had ceased their actions and stood by respectfully the second I entered the room. It was still odd, getting used to their behavior towards me, and no matter how much I tried to get them to treat me as an equal, they continued to view me as the superior I was too ashamed to consider myself as. "Good morning, Una," one of the young pack members, a girl barely past 16, grinned widely at me as she poured a cup of coffee. "Have you guys seen Xavier?" I asked hopefully. Someone must have seen him. It was unusual for him to wake up so early and leave without saying goodbye. Scarlett nodded her head, which captured my attention, and I diverted my gaze to fully face her. "He's in your spot, waiting for you." My heart skipped a beat, then started again with an excited rhythm. A big smile spread across my cheeks, and I quickly nodded and excused myself to go see him. As I walked past the open glass doors to the back gardens of the estate, my heart thrummed in my chest in excitement, wondering what surprise he was up to delivering this time. Being with Xavier had been one of the best things to have happened to me at all 20 the years of my existence. No exaggeration. Every day I would awake with a feeling of contentment, and when our gazes interlock, my heart burst into a million butterflies. It was no secret that I have fallen badly, and he never ceased to remind me that he has too. As I strolled through the gardens and past the trails that were highlighted by hundreds of blooming roses, the sun's rays danced across my exposed skin and warmed my cheeks, reminding me of that feeling of bliss I experienced every awakening hour since I'd started this new journey with my mate. Our spot. Soon enough I had reached the clearing where the pond lay, and from the far distance I could distinguish the shapes of a table set in the middle beside the overlapping stones. 2 chairs across one another, and beside it stood the man of my dreams. Xavier had sensed my presence from a distance as he stood patiently, dressed in a simple black shirt and dark jeans, his hair neatly pushed back and an adoring smile on his lips. I couldn't hold back my giddiness as I broke out into a sprint, closing our distance and crashing into his arms. Xavier groaned playfully as I giggled in response, my arms coming to wrap around his neck and crushing him to me, engulfing myself in his familiar warmth and addictive aroma. "Good morning to you, too," his velvety voice whispered against my hair, his exhale puffing an air against my cheek and leaving shivers across my skin. I pulled away to glance into my favorite pools of striking silver, twinkling with admiration. "What are you up to?" His lips curved as he gave me an innocent smile, gesturing towards the table filled with a wide variety of breakfast foods, from freshly baked pastries to skillfully cut fruit. As if the smile playing on my lips wasn't enough to convey my happiness, a small giggle escaped my lips. Xavier's fingertips trailed the length of my arm, leaving an electrified sensation in their wake. I descended to grab a hold of my hand. He guided me towards the seats and we both sat down at once. "How did you sleep?" he asked me softly, his gaze never leaving my face. "As always, very well." Within these past 2 months I had had the best sleep of my life. Falling into a deep slumber while cuddled in the arms of the person I loved was an indescribable feeling. It was heavenly, to say the least. I started with a chocolate croissant while Xavier poured us both coffee, offering me sugar and cream to have just the way I liked. We had grown to memorize even the tiniest detail about one another, but there still seemed to be so much more to learn, and I was ready to spend the rest of my days doing just that. "What are your plans for today?" Secretly hoping he didn't have anything in mind so that we'd spend a lazy day in, basking in each other's company. Xavier continued with the promise of his ancestors by keeping a constant look out for any dangers that may lurk in the shadows of their homeland, threatening the safety of both its people and its soil. So on some days, he would be too preoccupied walking alongside Vincent and Levi to spend time with me, and so Scarlett and I would plan a hangout with Ariel, and sometimes Seth and Sam would join us, the latter of whom had begun dating. But today, I craved Xavier's company more than any others. He clicked his tongue, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "No plans for today." Already planning all possible activities that we could indulge in. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Xavier continued on, and I gazed at him in wonder. I did mean to speak to you about an urgent matter. My fingers slowly let go of the chocolate croissant, setting in on the plate in front of me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What is it? But for some peculiar reason, my emotions were suddenly running wild as my nervousness increased. I watched Xavier confused as he pushed his seat back, his hard gaze holding mine captive as he stood from his seat and neared me. My neck was craned up as I stared at him in his full height while I remained in my seat, my heart beating rapidly against my ribcage, his gaze still holding mine in a captive hold. He lowered down until we stood at eye level. My breath caught in my throat as I was so bewitched by his heated gaze. I had no sense of our surroundings. All external noises were once again vacuumed into the deep void, and the only sound I could hear was that of my rapid heartbeat. And I was once again engulfed by Xavier's addictive aroma, and my attention completely captured and bewitched by his striking silver gaze. Nora, his voice whispered my name. I had waited my entire life for the moment I would connect with the other half of my soul. My eyes widened, the conversation taking a completely different turn from what I'd been expecting. I have loved you from my very first breath, and I vow to love you until my last. And then some more because loving you is the best thing I do. His words pulled at my heartstring, and my emotions were in a whirlwind as I rejoiced in the fact that he spoke the exact same words I found so hard to confess to him out loud. My eyes began to well up, and I madly blinked the tears away as I tried to clear my vision to see him better. But as I did so, I finally came to notice that Xavier wasn't only leaning down in front of me to be at my eye level, he was kneeling down on one knee, and within the small space between our trembling bodies, his large hand clasped tightly onto a small black box that was wide open, its contents on full display for my eyes to see. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Diamond ring. The gasp that escaped my lips was so sudden and full emotion that it turned into a small sob. My eyes snapped back to his, full of surprise and disbelief, full of awe and love, as Xavier continued to gaze into my own with an immeasurable admiration and love. Nora Wilson, you are my soulmate, my Luna, and the greatest gift this universe has blessed me with. Would you do me the greatest honor of my existence and accept my hand in marriage? Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.